Welcome to the ECD meeting. Let's look at our agenda. We have heard from Councilmember Ortiz that she may not be able to attend. She is a little iffy. She had a family emergency. So we can either, we don't have an attorney here, do we? We can either carry on or we can cancel this meeting until Ms. Ortiz can attend. I'm not sure how you conduct a meeting and get something done with two people. How do you do that?
Well, if you both agree on everything, then
yeah, I was going to say, what if we don't agree on everything?
But if you do not vote together, then you probably wouldn't finalize any action on anything because you would have a tie. So, if you can
just carry on, and once we disagree,
or you could postpone it. It's up to you. I mean, you could probably go ahead and approve the minutes. And
right.
You're going to vote against each other on that one.
Well, then let's just see how far we get.
If I may, it's fine to have
your microphone.
It's fine to have discussion only as well. I mean, if it's we want to move this along, I can't speak for her for sure, but if we looked at the timeline and had discussion and had either some suggestions for changes or some consensus, we could leave it at that and vote only when all three of us are here, but go through it. And then the priorities, this will be the first time we've really gone through it, so we could talk about, we've got a pretty good attendance, what we on the committee think, and if there's any input, and then that would let Councilwoman Ortiz read the minutes, and can we kind of pick up where we left off?
Well, what I don't want to have to do is we have this meeting, we talk about it, and then Ms. Ortiz comes next time, we have to re-talk about it again to catch her up.
It's totally up to you. I'm just putting that suggestion out there.
And that's why
I'm fine with either way.
I was hesitant on that because I don't want to have the same meeting twice. So let's just get as far as we can, and if we start not getting along. Okay, let's look at the minutes. Do you have any changes to the minutes?
Move to approve.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, they're approved.
Boom.
What? Did you have a change? Okay, then we have review and approve the calendar. I had a question about the calendar. When did this calendar ever come up? When did we start using this? Why did it come up? At one time, I thought this was a staff calendar.
It
so,
is a
so how
staff
did it get
calendar.
into this committee to approve? If it's just for staff?
I don't recall.
We have worked out the calendar and approved it as a committee and sent it to the council since day one. It again, I touched on it a little bit last time. The idea was that that the council was fully informed and had supported the whole process, so the process stayed within the committee structure as much as possible. The calendar is just helpful. It's not a big deal, but that way everybody's got it.
Yeah, I was just wondering the background. But staff, you started to use it first just for you.
We send it out to the agencies so they're aware of the process.
So this is really for the agencies. And
I was on the committee the first couple of years, so was Corey. Corey was here, and Sasha too.
Because my concern, and I don't have a problem with this, is fine, except my concern is I don't want to get into the habit of setting out procedure for every other committee that comes after us. I'd rather them have the ability to set their own calendar. And if and this is okay, that's why, yeah, we can set this calendar for ourselves for next year. But I think, I don't know. It just bothered me that all of a sudden we're approving a calendar that was staff's workable. But if that's where it's evolved to.
It's just a guide. And it helps us, it has always helped us think through what the process was. When we added volunteer committee, it was, oh yeah, okay, did we need more time for that? Just procedurally, internally. And then or the agencies are back here, they can nod or shake their heads, whatever, but it just gives everybody the information on how the procedure is supposed to go right up front, and then the staff uses it in everything. So I can see your point. It's just been helpful to have it laid out.
Where it came from. And So have you looked over has all your suggestions been?
I have looked it over. I think it looks great. I found one thing that was probably just an error, and that is that in the application process, the second of the middle of the three says training for ECD on grant process immediately following appointment at the first city council meeting. And I think that's meant to say the first ECD meeting after the committee's appointed in February.
Actually, it's the sentence is immediately following the appointment, meaning of the committee members at the first city council meeting in February 2019. So in other words, depending on what date that falls on after the council meeting, but we can.
It sounded like the training was supposed to occur at the city council meeting, fine. And so maybe just some phrasing would.
I will take out at the first city council meeting and just make it following appointment in February 2019.
That solves it.
Perfect.
Did you have any other changes? Anybody see any other changes? We good?
Have the guests seen it?
No.
Was it posted? Oh.
I guess it's just what they
process,
follow.
though.
Right, it's our process.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, they're the ones that know if they've gotten balled up in any of the processes for them, but it sounds like it's working. People's comments last time were that nobody was concerned about the calendar, as I recall, looking just for head shakes. All right.
Okay. What is your pleasure?
Let me ask you, because there are three big moving pieces in this three, right? My inclination would be to do a tentative recommendation so we know that we think it's ready to go, and then when we get finished with all three, that we do a final approval of the whole package.
Why?
Only because sometimes a change in one pushes back into a change in the other, since this is just first.
Because it doesn't matter. Because I don't think our calendar is going to change. Yep.
Well, we
It
can
doesn't
always
matter. It doesn't
we
matter
can
to me one
revisit
way or the
it.
other.
So
Okay, we can do that. Okay. So we move on to the priority sheet. I want to be sure I understand this very first part. Social services grants, emergency aid, 25% of funding or. So what does that mean? 25% of the total funding goes towards the emergency aid?
Up
And then-
to 35% or as low as 10 is what the plus or minus 15%.
And what's an emergency aid?
Those are our rent and utility assistance providers.
Rent and utilities. Okay, and then everybody else is preventative and counseling. Preventative what?
Well, the programs for like at-risk youth are all preventative.
Okay.
I mean, there's several programs.
So
that are
it's
preventative.
whatever they're trying to prevent in that agency.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Okay, comments?
along that, since you're talking about that one right now, what has happened over the years is that with certain agencies not scoring well and going out of the queue, the proportion of emergency aid to prevention and counseling has changed. And if I ran the numbers right, we were actually under 10% for the 2018 allocations. Mm-hmm. So I wondered if we should, if we still wanted to leave it the same way. Just an observation that we got so far down. It was.
Why did we have that in this beginning? Why was this put in?
I think it was to make sure that there was to provide a message that there was a balance, and that, you know, you could probably spend 100% of it on emergency aid and give all the money away, but if you're not doing the prevention and the counseling to help people to help themselves either resolve their problems or prevent them from happening, then they will recur. So the idea of investing in the categories that had been identified, of the categories that are in last year's mission.
So really, I get the whole process has changed enough that maybe this doesn't even apply anymore.
Could say that, but you could. It's a message that we do want to do some emergency aid, but that we want to proportional. I mean, that's what it was before. Proportionally do lots of preventive and counseling.
But if we have that down in our mission statement, I guess why would we need that up there? Do you have any?
Just a proportion. It was a dollars. Proportion was the intent.
So we don't use it for any kind of
Right.
a mechanism. I mean, we've never had to say, oh, we have 45% of the recommended grant totals in emergency aid, and so we need to lower that. We've never experienced that. So we don't use it as a mechanism currently, but that's not to say that it wouldn't, or that we wouldn't have to, you know, if we had one year where there were 50% of the dollars were requested by emergency aid programs, but you guys would discuss that. So,
And would that happen with the way it's set now?
Well, I mean, an agency could potentially come in and say, request, you know, a lot more money.
$70,000.
Yeah.
well, the 25 is
Right, there's a
Right.
max, so
That's
it
what I'm
would.
saying. That's why we kind of, you know, maybe it's a good thing to leave it in there. I mean, we haven't had the issue, but who's to say we're not going to have the issue? So it might be good to leave.
Okay.
Well, and it would be a message to next year's committee, for instance, knowing that we dipped all the way to the bottom of that depending on how the applications came in, what might happen is that if it was going to dip below 10%, they'd need to put the money in there and allocate the money to the applicants that were there to make sure we at least hit that lower threshold of funding. That makes sure that's a governor in there to keep it from going too high or too low. Right?
Well, it depends if we still, do you agree with that? Do you agree with the emergency aid getting 25 and the other? I mean, what does it matter? Why can't we just say equal or the same, or why are we given?
I would say that
75?
people wanted to, I'm trying to remember back to the discussions and the experience. There are other sources for emergency aid. It's really appealing to just pay people's bills and help them today. But if there isn't the prevention and education and
Right.
support for the young people, the seniors, the families, everybody, then it's just going to recur and the money's just going to go out. And so that, 8 years ago now, whenever we started this, I think it's worked pretty well. It was well-founded when it started, and it lets you not, it depends on who the people are
Right,
on the committee
right.
too, and their experience with social services and so on, not just spend all the money on cash assistance.
Okay, I get it. That's fine. All right, mission statement. So we have the senior citizen neighborhood-based programming, medical assistance, low income, programs for at-risk youth, emergency housing utility, neighborhood independent living-based services for persons with severe and persistent mental illness, support services for residents who are non-speaking. So if we start with the senior citizens neighborhood-based programming, meals, activities, transportation. Is there any changes we want to make to that? Anything to add, take away? Does that pretty well cover everything? Have you seen anything come up that you go, oh, we don't have a, okay.
I think we really haven't. I mean, it makes me a little nervous in that with the switch next year, then some of the categories were pulled out because they were pulled out and given to city departments instead of listed in this master list, and that always makes me nervous when you lose some of those essential services that we need for people, but there was a reason why that happened. These other ones and those before seem to have covered, and if I understood your question, I don't recall that we've gotten an application that didn't fit, that seemed compelling, that didn't fit anywhere else either. Have we?
No, I feel like the priorities are pretty clear in the RFP when we put this in the RFP, that people know if they fit the category or not. So we haven't received any applications that didn't meet the priority criteria.
Just
We didn't modify this list of priorities after, the discussion about contracted services coming out. So there are those agencies that their contracts came out of this process, but this didn't change.
So programs for at-risk youth, what can a program encompass? Is a program, is giving clothes to youth the program? Or is teaching a program? What is a program? That's just for my information.
I think the agency would be defining what their program is. We would just be deciding whether or not it was worthy of the funding or not. But I think a program can really vary from agency to agency. We have some programs that works with, education of youth, or some that work with senior meals or senior transportation. So
have you ever had
varies.
a program that didn't make it? Like you go, oh, that's not a program.
Have you?
I don't know that we have exactly, but what we have had is that we've structured this with outcomes, and so the entity needs to say, why are we doing this? What are we trying to prevent or fix or create, so that then the program, whatever it is, has to then be tied directly to the reason it exists. Not just it would be nice.
Right.
That's another reason to split the emergency aid and the preventive and counseling, come to think of it, because emergency aid, you're feeding people for a day. You're fixing their medicine today. But the prevention and counseling are longer-term outcomes that are defined differently, and your steps are different.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions on that section?
I do not. I think it's worked, and we didn't myself, and I don't think we got any feedback that was a need. Something for me is that, and I'm not sure where it fits in, maybe down under new untested, but to me, one of the things that's important and really valuable about this particular funding program overall is that it provides core dollars for tested agencies that are focused, that are achieving outcomes for folks, and it gives them core dollars to build on year after year. And so that they've done well with that.
Okay, how about social services grant details? So there's a minimum grant of $10,000, maximum of $25,000, except for Shawnee County Medical Society and Positive Connections, which were grandfathered in last year. Last year or 2 years ago?
Last year.
Last year. In the new untested programs, we don't set any money aside, but if we have money left, there's a maximum of $15,000 if we don't know anything about the agency. Nothing, they're new, so they haven't proved their worth. Because we have people coming in that was new, getting more than these agencies have been around 100 years. And we didn't even know if they were really going to make it or...
I have a question about
sure.
that one when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Well, I have questions about each of them, but on this new programming, I wondered, I was not part of the committee last year, why it was set as $15,000 per program for an organization that was not established versus for a program itself that wasn't established. It's always easier to get money for startup than for long-term.
Well, what is a program versus, what do you...
Well, there's an agency, and then each agency
Right.
may just apply to us for one program, or they may apply for multiple programs.
Right.
And so if what we're talking about is funding programs, then, and making sure that they're tested and that there are outcomes to look at and so on before we would fund, rather than funding something that's brand new and untested. my preference is that it be, if we're going to do anything new, that it's based on a program, not just a new agency.
But see, that was our thought, was we know the agency's been around 100 years, 50 years, 25 years. They're still going, their programs keep going. Why would you do that when you already know the organization is planted and set, as opposed to a new organization that you don't know will be there in 6 months?
But a new program's still a new program. I mean, what we saw was that there were 1 or 2 this year, and they got money. They asked for whatever they wanted. They're seasoned, and so that bumps money. It makes money unavailable for those long-term programs.
But I don't
it
think
was
it did
in-
make it unavailable. Oh, go ahead.
No, she's right. The rationale between that $15,000 cap on a new organization was there was no past experience with the organization. If one of the established agencies like Community Action wanted to apply for a new program, they can apply up to the $25,000 cap. But this bottom paragraph that says that there's no new funding or no funding available for new programs if funding is exhausted on established programs. So that's what that $15,000 cap was about, was an agency that the city didn't have any track record with. That's the history there. She's correct about that. That's how the committee came up with that dollar amount. They wanted to set a threshold to kind of get in and prove yourself, I think, is what the...
Right, and I think we need to not reward, but acknowledge that our agencies have been around for a long time, that we do have faith in them, we do appreciate what they do, and not go, sorry, we need to take dollars from you to help this new organization we don't know anything about.
I guess my lens on that was just a new program. Is that a seasoned agency or a brand new agency can start a new program. It's either going to fly or it's not. It's easier to get funding from other sources to start something new for up to 3 years to get something started and tested, and then what you need is long-term funding to keep it going, and that's what's harder to get. And so for me, out of this pot, if you will, having it really, we've had that discussion before over the years, not in recent years, but over the years, there was an excitement, for instance, for a couple years, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, let's do stuff new, and so this funding got thrown out to a whole lot of brand new startup programs, either with, I don't remember, probably within agencies as well as otherwise, and many of them failed, you know, and it took money away from that core money for the established programs that had been proven and had demonstrated that they were really reaching outcomes. And my preference is to protect this money for that.
Well, we did not have anybody new that wanted money, did we?
No new agencies. We did have
But we did have new programs that took a lot of money.
Right, but we didn't have any, we weren't taking away from a program because there wasn't any program that wanted any money. And where can you get easy startup money?
It's easier to get startup money
where?
than long-term money.
From where? Where do you get that? How do you? Because I'd be interested in knowing, where do you get that startup funds?
Depends on the programming and the year.
Because I'm not sure I buy that. I mean, I'd have to have proof of that it's easier to get startup money than long term. Because I'm not sure I buy that. So that, I mean, that's not much to say about this, but I prefer that it stays the same. So is this our first vote that's going to be? Do you have anything that would help staff? Either way, what?
This is a policy decision, whether or not the committee prefers to offer a lower dollar amount to new organizations. This is not, we don't have a preference. But this is a policy decision that you all.
But see, this has worked. And when did we do this? 2 years? 1 year ago? 2 years ago?
I think this was last year.
It was new last year.
And see, I think it did it work. So I'm really hesitant.
But we didn't really have any,
right?
There weren't any applicants, were there?
No. So it's not broke.
Yeah, we did.
So why
There
would you
wasn't new.
change
They
it?
were returning.
Right, so we did it. Yeah, MERS is new. We haven't funded MER with social service funds before.
But they didn't score, did they?
No.
I didn't think so.
Well, that was just the thought. I mean, if a new program,
But your reasoning was because we were taking away money from others? Which
it does take away
which we
money.
didn't. So I don't think that argument is fact yet, because it didn't.
We had either one or two new programs last year that got funded.
No, I'm talking an organization. I'm talking a program that wanted funding that didn't get it, that then it took away.
And my point is, from the program perspective,
Okay, so-
if you fund a new program and you have the same dollars in the pot, whether it's a program offered by an existing organization or by a new organization, it takes away from the dollars that are available for the ones that were already there.
So for clarification, your preference would be to not fund any new programs or agencies, is that correct? Just to try to understand what you're saying.
No,
Making those an equivalent was that until a program was my thought was 3 years old.
So if we have,
So they need to find funding elsewhere until
get it
year
started.
3, and then you would be okay with them applying. Okay.
And sometimes
I'm
what
tracking.
agencies do is they begin to develop something internally in the agency and they want to grow it. So that you'd have to see. But yeah, it was just a new program would have to be tested so that we could look at those outcomes and so on.
and so what if it worked in year 1? Great, 100% outcomes. Do it for 3 years. I disagree. I like it just the way it is. So we're going to hold off on.
The other question I had, because I was not part of the committee, was the rationale behind the grandfathering and whether that was intended to be long-term.
Well, you know, I was there, but I wasn't part of that either. That was, I was part of that, but
It was the year before, I believe, with Michelle.
yeah, it was
and
Michelle and
Tony
Tony
and
Emerson.
Brendan.
Okay.
And then they came in, and that was their recommendation. And it passed. But those agencies did come forward, and there were a lot of people in the community that came forward that, and I know it was the medical, that the doctors, now tell me if I'm right, the doctors were hesitant on continuing if there wasn't this much funding? There's something about the doctors that are in there that couldn't afford that.
Service.
I think
that-
historically they have not wanted to ask the doctors for money because the doctors donate their time.
Yes.
That's
So
what
they-
I
talk about
recall
that.
from the past.
But
And
they-
this money they're using for prescriptions.
Correct.
Right,
So
and they
that
wouldn't
could
be able
be
to do
Correct.
very many at all. This is my recall of when they came up and spoke. But
So to answer your original question on whether or not that was like in perpetuity in terms of the dollar amounts, because there's a new committee, often it would be up to the committee. But Councilmember Clear is absolutely correct in that they had a bunch of public community support. They made very compelling arguments, and this was the recommendation of the committee in the year that this decision was made. Staff supports this decision that was made by the committee because we agree with what they said about the programs that they're providing in the community. They're really important.
and I think AIDS said no one else does that. So they have a bigger clientele, and they needed the additional monies. Do you remember that?
They're here.
Is that right? Did you?
Nobody else knows what we do, yes.
Right.
Our services right now are about, our load right now is about 200 people. About 75% of which are viral recipients. They're not going to be passing the virus if we're not doing
I mean, if you want to look at it again, I mean, we can
We could
have that
them back.
hearing and,
Well, I wasn't involved in it. You know, when these things get to the council level, the council generally will support the process and so on. Probably any of the agencies could rally 20 people to talk about how valuable their programs are.
So
And so,
but they didn't.
obviously not.
Right.
But I don't know if they were invited. I don't know what the process was. That was probably the year you put the cap in, right?
We did that too.
That was
Right, that was the same year that the cap
Yep,
went in.
Yep.
So these dollar amounts would be what is included in the 19 funding totals that went to council already. So
Right.
as you guys get geared up for the 2020 process, if you'd like to reconsider those amounts, we could make sure that the agencies are made aware at what meeting you'd like to hear from them, and we could set that up again. If you're considering changing it or not, it's up to the committee whether you'd like to hear from the agencies, the information that they provided to the committee that made that decision or not.
I would suggest, can you go back and watch that meeting?
Yeah.
And then if you think, yeah, we need to do this again, or maybe you'll hear it and say, oh, I get it, and I agree.
Yeah, and I probably have the records. I mean, that wasn't a standalone decision because it was tied in with capping everybody else, which had not been done before either, right?
Well, we did kind of have a whole separate meeting
Right.
specifically for Shawnee Medical and Positive Connections
Oh, I see.
to discuss. So there is a whole meeting that took place specifically to discuss those two specific agencies, and I can certainly research it if you would like me to look for it for you.
Well, that'd be helpful.
Okay, I
But,
can do
I
that.
mean, so there wasn't one for everybody else.
No.
There was only one for those two, so of course nobody else said
Well,
anything.
no, it wasn't a meeting just for those two. I
Were
mean,
they
it was
the only two
anybody.
that were over? Is that why?
They were the only two that
Or
asked.
significantly over?
I believe that
They were the only two
Okay.
that were over.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, everyone else, the 25% either was right there on what
The
they had been
25,000,
guilty, 25,000.
Yeah.
It was either right there what they had always been getting, or it was more.
Well, and therefore, and maybe watching the meeting will be helpful, whether that was an idea of not to do such a substantial cut in year one without any notice, whether that was, whether the intent was not to suddenly cut them or what. Just I wasn't there.
You know, to go back on the 10 and the organization versus program, I know Tawny's here, Crystal's here. Are those the only, anybody else has programs within your agency? Do you want to speak to your thoughts on program versus organizations? Like on the suggestion of having 3 years of your program be successful before you get funding? Do either one of you want to speak on that? On how that would affect you? I don't know, is it on? Oh, I'm sorry, I probably should have. Oh, okay.
So I'm Crystal with Boys and Girls Club. So when I first started grant writing for Boys and Girls Club 3 years ago, we got social service dollars for one of our programs, which is our Adams Club location. We opened our teen center in 2015, and that one we applied for then, and that was our second program. We had always had that program, it was just in a different location. And then this year, we applied for our Logan location, which has been up and running for, I think, about 6 or 7 years now. So it's not that it's a new program. And so I would be interested to see how you would differentiate between a program that's been around for us for 6 years. So it was funded by the Kansas Department of Education for the first 5 years.
Boom. Yeah.
Oh, that's one.
Oh, it wasn't
Okay.
easy. It wasn't easy. That's a 65-page grant. But, so it's already up and running, but it's just, this is the first time that we've asked the city to fund that because of the number of at-risk students in that location and how many live in the city of Topeka. So if it was a brand new program, like if we opened a brand new location at another building in central Topeka, it would still be the same program that we would always run. It would just be a new location for us. So,
But if you, so the program that you got funded new to this source this year was in fact 5 years old, had been funded and up and running for 5 years.
Correct.
Before, so it would have met my 3-year
right, but it just kind of,
threshold criteria.
right, it just depends on
just for
how,
talking.
yeah, how you, I mean, we could show, just like if we went into a brand new building, it's the same program we've run since 1956. It's just a new location. So for us, it's probably a little different than a brand new program coming up with something brand new.
But if you came up with something brand new that was very different, I don't know.
Right, like if Boys and Girls Club of America came up with a specific program. But it
You're
kind
going
of,
to do international travel with your kids. I mean, let's just say. It's something I want to do with all your kids. But anyway, that would be different. It would be something you'd not done.
right.
And so,
Ours is kind of different in that it encompasses, it's youth development. So it encompasses all kinds of programs within that.
right.
So it's could be literacy, math, decision-making skills, tutoring. So all of that kind of goes into youth development. So ours is a little
So there
different.
might be a difficulty. I mean, I was director at Housing and Credit Counseling, which you know, and so when we did tenant landlord, when we started doing money management, that was different. They were related, but
Right.
it was clearly a different program. When you
Right.
get into home buyer, it's different, and then was even spin-offs from the credit counseling when we did bankruptcy intervention and had bankruptcy programs, and they've had some grants for student loan, especially targeted student loans things lately, and so those. They balloon up and become a program of their own when they grow out of something, but so I can see how you might have a hard time identifying whether it was new or not.
Yeah,
We'd
for
need to
us
do
it would
that.
be pretty difficult because it is the same. Like even when we open a new, like we're opening 4 new locations in January in Auburn-Washburn School District. It's the same program we've ran since 1956. It's just a new location. They're going to get the same programs that all of our other kids get at our other 10 locations.
And I don't mean to do this in a negative way, but since you're such a fabulous grant writer and you're standing right here, if you said, well, hey, I've got this down, so I'm going to put 5 more of our programs on next year, and I can get $25,000 a piece for them, and all of a sudden, the Boys and Girls Club's sucking up the entire thing, what do you do?
Well, we
So-
don't have any more in the city limits right now. So all the rest are in the county, but I
It's
get it.
hypothetical.
Then maybe we put a cap on
get
how
it.
many programs.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, the potential is there, and we want to put a message out. And so,
And maybe we put a
Yeah,
cap.
that makes sense to put a cap. But those are, the reason we did another one this year is because it does reach kids in the city of Topeka. But those are our only club
there was
locations that are in the city right now.
Breakthrough.
So hope that
the
helps.
test rat, thank you. And good work.
Tawny, you want to speak to? Yours may be a different way too.
I can't solve your dilemma. Connie Stottlemyre, Community Action. We do operate a variety of programs and services, and I agree 100% that sustainability is incredibly important to the nonprofit industry. We don't make profit off of what we do, and if we want our community to keep having those things available, someone has to keep paying for those things. So sustainability of existing programs is really important. On the other hand, especially in my industry, when you're fighting poverty, if you do the same thing that you've always done, you may get the same results that you've always gotten. And we know that we want innovation. We know that we want stronger poverty-fighting measures. So the capacity to do new things is equally, or a little bit less, but very close to equally important too. And so I can't solve your dilemma, but I think it's hard grant-making decisions, just like everyone else that gives money away for good purposes in our community, is that at some point you have to decide what is the city's priorities and where do we fall on these particular issues that can both be very, very important to success in our community. So, sorry, didn't help you, but
Well, what I
there's
would
2
like to
cents.
do is make something that's timeless, and maybe even just with your testimony, today, maybe it can't be. Maybe we just have to adjust it when it looks like.
Yeah, city
don't know.
priorities will change too,
Right.
as community priorities change.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought of that while they were here. I thought, well, why wait until and hear from them? So
It's awkward. Thank you so much, because it's so much better to have all of you helping us go ahead and have the squishy discussions and look at these things.
okay, so what's our next? Where were we? Before I backtracked.
You were still on the new untested program.
Okay, we're still there. Yeah. All right. Any other? Do you have anything about the funding?
I have a
else?
comment for you guys about the
Okay.
funding. So what you have here is the 2019 priority sheet. The
Right.
contracted services will come off of this sheet for the 2020 document. So I just want
Right.
to point that out, that that one will be gone
Okay.
when we put this together to go to council the next time. We'll be removing that. And so that just an editorial note there.
So we recommend this with this priority today. Was that the goal?
The priority sheet goes to the,
I mean, do we
Body.
recommend
what do I
fund?
do with my calendar?
We do put a number
before-
in, though,
Yes.
as part.
Today?
Yeah.
Well,
no.
we could discuss it today and
you
then
can.
vote it out when Sylvia's here, but could talk about.
We have
So-
to send that to the finance department by June 18th
What?
of next year.
So why do we do this paper now?
Because why not?
Because then you don't have to meet again until it's time to look at grant applications.
Well, the deal is that it needs to be established before the RFP process starts, so that that everybody knows whether it's going to be the same or more or less.
This document is in the RFP, so that the agencies know where, what the priorities are. So.
Right.
But we don't know, Nick, right, until next whatever, if that's going to work. Okay.
Well, that's
Yeah, if
why.
you have something to say, yeah.
Good.
I think on the 2019 sheet that's out there right now, it says 585,000. If I'm mistaken, where it ended up last year, for 2019 is about 440,000. So quite a bit less. So my only concern is not knowing what the budget's going to be, and more than likely it's going to be closer to that $440,000 total than it would be to the 585 that was listed there. I don't want to put a number out there that's significantly higher than what it's going to end up being.
Yeah, because this sheet would have
agree.
gone to council before the 2019 budget process was completed, this document. So that's where you guys recommended the 585 plus the 211, 233 for the 2019 budget. And so to Nick's point, say that one more time about what it may or may not be available in 2020 for funding this.
Without having a crystal ball in front of me, my guess is it's going to be closer to what the actual number for 2019 was, or will be, which is 440,000. That's with the contracted services already taken out of that
Right.
number. That's already been budgeted separately.
But this is like budgeting for anything. Last time we just said, okay, if everybody gets it, this is how much money we'll need. And that's why we plugged in that larger amount.
Into this document, yes.
Right.
That's why your recommendation was
Right, because we thought,
585, because.
well, we got to start somewhere, so.
I think that's the only time the recommendation has come forth that way. And so I hope that what we would do is look at how much the total was the year before. We've got an idea of what the budget's going to look, we as council members are immersed in what's going on with the budget and the projections and the challenges to it, so that we could make a pretty reasonable recommendation for not what the total need is, but what the recommendation is to go forward.
Is that how you would do a budget? If I was going to sit back and if I thought I was going to buy a car, would I say, okay, my top amount would be 20,000, but I'll try and get by with 10. Would I budget for the 20 or would I budget for the 10?
I would try and be as realistic as possible, and looking at our revenue growth versus our expenditure
See,
growth.
that's because it's money. It's numbers. I'm sorry. Okay.
What we want to do for the agencies is have it be realistic as well. Like if somebody's got a new program, a new agency, and we put some big number in there and everybody goes, wow, and then it's not really there because realistically it's
Well, that's
likely to
why
match or
they
be
only get
close to-
25,000. So we can guess, unless there's new agencies, we can more or less.
Well, and I do think at one point the funding amount was pretty close to this 500.
Yeah, I think so
It was
too, wasn't it?
489 or something at one point. It was pretty high. But what we can do for you guys is bring you back a draft of 2020, and we can plug in the actual total that's in the 2019 budget as a place
would
for
be
you guys
helpful.
to start the discussion. And just what Nick said, this is a recommendation, but you guys know how the budget process
Right.
works. I mean, and if you get something in the budget, the likelihood of you getting that number increased is pretty slim. You're probably going to get what you got the year before, or maybe a little less, in my experience.
But that's where this committee's work, where the council is looking at the committee to say, okay, we know kind of where it's going. If the committee wants to really pitch for some more, the committee's going to need to back that up and convince the council to vote for it. But by having it voted in January, then that thing is all locked before the whole RFP process starts. Those just, unfortunately, or whatever, have to run, that RFP process runs at the same time that the city is beginning to build the budget and solicit the numbers. So in a way, this is just the first one of the first numbers to come out because it's early.
So why couldn't we, or can we, or do we ask agencies if they plan on applying? And then you'd have, okay, we have 10 going to apply. They could get 25,000.
We can, but I bet your answer is going to be every one of them that applies, because it's a pretty consistent list.
Is it?
Pretty much. I mean, like Mir was new this year, but there is kind of a core group there, and these ladies could tell you better than me because they've done it longer. But there's kind of a core group there that is always applying in this. But we're happy to send that out.
No, not at that, no.
And ask who intends to apply.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the money.
Pretty
on what-
reliable. I mean, what we'd known, and it was hard to anticipate. This process is maturing, if I can use that word, pretty much the way people had anticipated or kind of hoped that it would. And there was, by using outcomes and really and scoring and really setting some standards and holding to them. So it was not a political decision. It was a performance decision, that there might be some fallout, and there has been some fallout, and then there have been some new, but there has been that steady, again, and back to my thing, I mean, the core funding so that you can build on it, but every year, even if some of these other things ebb and flow, that you got a pretty good shot at getting, as long as you've been doing a good job and the program's still valuable.
Well, but I don't want to undershoot it. I would still want to overshoot it.
I mean, we could probably come up with a recommendation as how to proceed on this so it's clear to
Because we knew
everyone
last year's
that-
was high.
Yeah.
We knew
I don't
that.
think the council realized that, truthfully. Maybe they did. Because generally that number that gets approved is the number that goes forward into the budget. That did not happen. Somehow.
High in the sense that it was the number based on if everyone
Right.
requested 25 and got funded, which is not a bad kind of perspective to start from, I don't think. But it kind
But
of
now
is in
that we're
conflict
there-
with the
Right.
holding that bar at like 89%, which I
Right.
also think is a good policy for you guys to stick to, because you want the best performers getting the limited amount of money that you have. So, policy decision.
Yep.
Okay, this is good.
Okay. So what are you going to do? You're going to, who's
He'll
going to
give
plug
us
the
a
money?
recommendation on how finance will give us a recommendation on how to put together the proposed funding amount, or you'll give us a dollar amount that you think makes sense from.
But that,
If you just give us the actual dollar amount from this year,
Well, I'm going to plug that into
Yeah.
the sheet.
Yeah.
So you'll have it.
We'll work together to
Okay.
come up
But
with
see, that goes backwards to me. We tell you what we want, and then you tell us what you have. I mean, you know what I mean? Because if they say, okay, we have 400,000, well, then how's our 25,000 cap going to work? Then we're going to have to change all that. I'd rather say we have 25,000 cap. These programs are applying. If you only say 300,000, how are we going to adjust that? I'd rather you adjust your budget than us adjust ours.
That goes back to a priorities discussion. So going back to your car analogy, if you realistically have $10,000 for a car right now, but you want a $20,000 car, you have to find that other $10,000 somewhere else.
That's what your job is. You
How are you
find
gonna
that.
how you gonna
You
pay for
find
it?
the other 10. Because I don't think it's going to be a big difference. I think it's going to be right around what you said, the same as this year. I do, but I don't want to have to redo this 25,000 cap.
Well, but we did what we did this year with the $25,000 cap
Right,
in it.
right.
So,
So I want to keep it that way.
You did.
But, and you're saying, I mean, we probably
Yeah, and
can,
you-
right?
But the piece that's missing from what you're saying, the difference between what you're saying and what she's saying is that she is kind of coming at it from, in a perfect world, all of them would get 89% or higher on their applications, and we could fund all of these great programs if you would just give us the money that
That's
we
right.
need. And you're saying, kind of more along what Nick's saying, the reality is we only have this much. So, and it did work, you're right about that, because of the way that the scores shook out. And again, this is another one of those, this is a policy decision. Do you guys choose kind of the policy pathway of recommending the highest dollar amount if everyone got an 89 or higher, supposing that that's the threshold that you use again, or do you use kind of in the more realistic model, the budgeted amount for the current year?
and it's not like we're making a funding proposal to somebody else. We're
To yourselves. Yes.
We're responsible to look at this valuable program within the context of all the different things that we're doing with city tax dollars and taking our knowledge and experience of what the process has been like the last couple of years and what we see coming up, and trying to make to our colleagues a suggestion that it seems reasonable given where we are.
So if we leave it about the same, are we going to be okay?
You're going to be able to fund this about the same
Right,
number of agencies as you were for 19.
right.
One-
Which you say is
One thing you might think
level.
about, just to throw an additional wrench into the mix here, sorry, is you have the score sheet, so you could look at those that almost made it. Because when we talked about this at the last meeting, if they come back to us and say, hey, give us feedback on the application, we do that and can incorporate that going forward and give it to all of the agencies that scored below your funding threshold. But what if, to her point, what if they come in with and hit those marks that they got scored down on in this year's? I don't know. You might give that some thought before your next meeting, because there are a few that were just under the wire that will. There's a good
Hopefully.
likelihood that they can improve their application to get over the wire.
Well, and that goes back to, like he said, it's all priorities. If this is,
yes.
if that's your priority, and if social services is a city priority,
And so it drives it that we could end up looking at a different way to make decisions within the dollars also.
Well, and it doesn't preclude them from getting funded. All that would happen if you had those couple that were close to the line get over the line next time and had a couple of more agencies to fund, it would just lower the dollar amount that the aggregate got. You know what I mean?
no.
It would lower what everybody else got.
Because the whole
No, I
group
don't get
would
it.
go down a little bit
that's
because you'd
the
have
deal.
you'd
So
have
instead of
that same-
25,000, you'd have 24.
Well, some of them didn't get 25,000 anyways because what they got was what their percentage was. If
Right.
I got a 93% on my application,
Right.
I got 93% of what I asked for.
So say that again, about what it would cause.
So say you had
Slowly.
2 additional agencies get funded in the 2020
Okay.
cycle that were not funded in the 2019
Right.
cycle. You could still fund them. It would just make everybody's award amount go down slightly because you'd have 2 more in the pool drawing from that same pot of 440. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I thought that's what we tried so hard not to ever do.
Can't do that.
But we don't have unlimited
We can
resources.
do it.
That's our problem.
It's up to Nick.
What it would really do is eliminate the bottom person from
Oh,
getting
that's true.
funding.
That's true.
It wouldn't affect
Yeah.
ranking number 1 that got 95% because the formula hasn't changed. So that person will still get 95% of what they requested. What will happen is at the bottom, when you run out of money, those agencies would not get funded.
She's right, I'm wrong.
But that,
She's
again,
right.
is a decision that's made by this committee in terms of how the money is dispersed, is awarded once the,
Is that what we did last year, or have we had to do that?
We said it last year where
Yeah.
we said it on this document at the bottom of the document. That says that they
Okay.
will get 95 or whatever their score is
Okay.
of what
Until the
they
funds are
requested
exhausted.
until the funds are exhausted.
Okay. So that solves that problem.
So this year and the year before, 89, that threshold worked. And we were able to fund everybody that had an 89 or higher. But in theory, I guess, if that
Yeah, that number could
grew,
be
Right.
varied.
the threshold would have to either go up or
have to adjust
change
something.
the
Well, I'm
formula.
okay with that. I just want to, I want to stay,
Yeah, she's right. I'm wrong.
I just want to stay here.
Thank you.
And, yeah, yes.
But as that window shrinks, I mean, if you've got 10 agencies at 90, then, and you can't cut them all off and they all got the same score, then
No,
you
we'd
have to make a decision.
adjust the formula, which that's when
Correct.
it gets to the point where we're pulling our hair out because how do you?
Yeah, we were,
Tweak
last year,
it
that's
to-
what we were trying to eliminate was
Right.
from adjusting the formula
Right.
every single year. But
Making it consistent.
But I think that ranking of 89 or 90 or whatever the scores could potentially go higher if we have a bunch of new agencies coming on board,
Right.
taking up funds, so.
But also as the seasoned agencies, if it's the same program, the same agency, and they get better and better at that, then we've already seen the scores
Yeah.
start to come together. So at some point, there might need to be a relook at how do you pick, how do you differentiate, do you just throw more money in, what do you do?
Yeah, you guys need to get the
Well, like
finance
you-
office to give you more money for this program, I think is what that means.
Get it out of the air.
Well, like you said, we're responsible to make sure this money's spent the best way.
Correct.
And at the best, in the ones that have the outcome and the outputs.
Correct.
So if they all are up here, that's good.
Yeah, but we
99.
still have to balance that with how much
Right.
money is on the table. So.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. Yeah, it says right there, Corey.
It does.
Glad I could help.
It says right there. Okay, so we are going to, have you changed your mind at all about the programs versus organizations?
I need to think about it, and I guess I have to watch the video. Corey's
Okay.
going to send me the link to the video on the other one.
So I don't want to come back with Councilmember Ortiz and then have to re-talk about all this. So maybe I'll just reach out with her and tell her what we decide and for her to think about it and be ready to vote next time. But you don't want to vote on the calendar, right? You don't want to vote on
No,
this?
I'm not sure there's.
And the next meeting then will be to get this cemented down and to start on the scoring. Yeah, if there's any changes on the scoring. Correct? Do we want to set that meeting now, or do we want Liz to?
I'm happy to.
Well, so am I. Let's go. What's our first date on our calendar that we have to do something by?
December 31st.
December, okay.
Well,
Kinda.
Was this 1:30? I thought that
Yes.
Councilwoman Ortiz preferred 3 o'clock or later.
Well, I couldn't do it
For her
like
work
3 o'clock or
schedule.
later.
You can't
I
anymore?
couldn't.
Oh, or just today?
And she said it was okay.
Okay,
I mean,
okay,
didn't she, Liz? Yeah, she was okay with it.
okay.
How about October 10th? At 3:30? Or 3, or,
I have a different meeting at exactly that time.
how about at 1:30 or 1?
Do 1.
You can do 1,
did you say the 10th?
Yep.
Well, these guys can be here. I have to be at governing body agenda review at 3.
We have the homeless task
Would
force,
be one.
but I could probably
She was
skip
saying
that.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Homeless task force is at
Yeah,
1?
but I could miss that if I had to, but of course the agencies would probably have to miss as well.
Oh,
How about the 15th? At 3.
I can do
That
that.
works.
Works? Liz, you got anything? Anybody? Nick, work for you? Okay. 3 o'clock, October 15th. And do we think it'll be here? I guess they'll let us know.
Look it up and double check. Yeah.
So you're going to want to finalize the calendar and the priority sheet, and can we
Yes.
talk real briefly about what you want to talk about with the scoring so that we can be prepared?
Oh, I don't want to talk about anything at the scoring. What do you want to talk about?
Well, you asked me for questions, and so I had a list that included some scoring issues back on the 22nd of August. That is what I brought with me today.
Right.
So if those, I assume, went to you, Liz?
You got them.
Did we?
You got them.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll double check then.
And that's no more? I mean, if we,
I don't think so.
okay.
That was in August.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. That's helpful. And then I know that you had a question on whether or not we could pull EC impact up. So we can pull it up, but to look at the application, you would have to actually, I believe, go in and fill out an application. Is that correct? Is there a way?
Get it once it's submitted?
No, to just look at the
Just to
questions,
Look at the questions with nothing in it.
to just look at it, just to scroll through.
We
don't you?
can,
I think you can look at the scoring and it gives you the, I mean, it's the same thing that's on your.
Well, you went, when you did the training, I went to the training for the reviewers. Didn't we pull it up and just go through the questions or not?
Because it's the same thing that's on the RFP, the score sheet, and that's
Right.
just the way it is.
Right.
So why would you have pulled up if you have the score sheet?
oh, the questions are I got you, the same.
Well, I
They're
didn't
the
go back
same
and
as
look
on
at it.
here.
Right, the score sheet is included with the RFP because
Right
we
here.
send that out.
Well, in the past, and I didn't go back and look at it, I couldn't get into it back a while ago, and I didn't try recently. We had some questions about on there that weren't scored, and so some of the questions that have come up has to do with strategic planning and budgets, both of which are, I didn't know how they were phrased today, how the questions, what was in
So the
there.
questions are
And there had been some comments that the budget was not asking for overall agency budget and then program budget as it used to, and that was a little bit problematic. So,
Why is that problematic and for who would be my question.
well, that would be the discussion next time, right?
No, that's
All
what I
right.
said. That's my question
talk
for
about it
next
right now?
time. No.
So can we pull it up or no, we can't?
You can pull up the scoring like that.
Not
to
the
see it.
scores, the questions.
Just the application.
It depends because if they choose something, like if they put it in the output, you're not going to see the outcome section until they actually put in an output. Then it takes you to
So
Having it filled
certain
in.
answers will take you to a different kind of spot, but we can certainly pull it
Okay.
up and.
But doesn't it just say output and outcome? Why would,
No, because it'll go
No?
out.
it has something before all? Can you print the screens out? You can?
Yeah, we'll look into that and get back with Liz.
It might be a lot of pages, I thought. I don't-
It is?
If it was, you know,
Is it,
I can do it.
I think it would be.
we could
But
do a
why-
test application?
Oh, just just dummy it up?
Oh, yeah, we could do that, so you could see the whole
Then-
application.
Oh, well,
Let's just look at that.
Because
would
you,
be
because you might want to change the questions?
It's gonna be different.
if we're talking about scoring,
These correlate to.
then what the questions are, and if you wanted to use a question that's in there but actually isn't currently, for us to understand whether it's just in there but we're not seeing the results and it's not being used for the scoring.
Is there any?
I know, an example is that we put in a question on strategic planning, and there was a score on it before, and it had to do with, it was generated by the fact that, in one of the early years we were doing this, all the senior centers were under a directive from the Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging to collaborate together and reduce expenses on transportation. And all three of them asked for money for transportation and did not disclose that they were supposed to be doing some consolidated transportation planning. And so it was like, well, if either the question at the time said, is your agency itself doing some internal strategic planning, or are you, I could probably find an old one, but, or are you working with anyone else? So there was some context for this program that they were asking for funding for.
Do you have the driver application before we were using EC Impact that you could look up and see?
And I think there were some points for that, but it also was very informative in terms of what was going on.
We'll go back and find the paper applications if we're able, which we should be able to, so that we can identify the question that you're talking about in particular. And then we'll also try to see if we can get those questions in EC Impact in paper format so that we can send them to you in advance of the next
Okay.
meeting. So you have a chance to look at them. That way we're not spending a bunch of time familiarizing you with what questions are in there. We can go right to the ones that you have questions about. Right? We can do that, right, ladies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, we can't guess every situation that might come up, so we can ask a question about it.
I understand.
So sweet.
That'd be
We've had some comments
forever.
about budgeting and about reporting and how people get scored on reporting and things
Well, I
like that.
bet we do. I
So-
bet everybody does. I mean, everybody wants to tweak a grant. All right, any other questions, comments,
I had one.
concerns? Yes.
As part of what we discussed along the way, there was the issue of whether we were going to have job descriptions for the reviewers. And I thought if we were getting ahead of that
Well, so
with a draft or whatever.
I guess that that's a policy decision, but I have a couple questions about that. So the grant review committees that have been used up to this point, all of the committees have been made aware of who sits on those. And I think that we've done a great job of selecting folks that have years, if not decades, of experience in the grant arena. So just based on the feedback that we got back from the volunteers that we used for this year's process, if we make this too complicated, we are having a hard enough time finding folks to help us in the first place. When we did the had an after action meeting with them, and their feedback was that it took 40 or more hours to go through those applications and score them. And this is a volunteer opportunity. So the best that we can do is say, hey, we'll reciprocate. If you need a committee to do something, we will help you out. But we're not paying for these positions. And so I guess my caution would be that if we make this too complicated, are we going to struggle even more to get grant reviewers? If you guys wanted to give us some guidelines, I think that is just fine. But a job description then almost is to the point of, like, it's a,
Mandate, like you have to.
yeah,
know
I
what?
don't know. I just am, we're asking someone to volunteer their time to help with our process, and we've only used experienced grant folks up to this point. So I guess my first question would be, why do we need that? Because we have not yet proposed to the committee that we use someone that is not very well versed in the grant arena. So that would be a question that I would have, is why do we need it? And I would also share with you that 2 in particular of our 5 members of this year's committee said, I can't help you out next year. It took too much time. So I just am concerned about, you know, how that would impact our ability to find folks to volunteer for this, you know.
You know what? That's an interesting discussion. When it came up, my understanding was we just wanted to quantify qualifications. It wasn't any more than that, or certainly not something where someone would be reviewed, but more what you just described,
Sure.
which has
So
always been verbal. It was just more to make it a little more timeless.
Sure, we can create, I would be more comfortable if we didn't call it position description. Because
Probably,
then I'm asking
obviously.
a volunteer to fill a job for the city, and we're not paying.
No,
So-
I don't think that's not how I understood it. It was more the experience and the qualifications that they would bring forward. And if I'm recalling correctly, the only issue was that not everybody who is experienced at doing grants is experienced with outcomes, and making sure that at least a majority of our seasoned committee has done that in terms of outcomes.
Well, I guess why
So
can't,
that we made sure if there needed to be some training for the committee that they got it.
why can't
then
we
we can-
just suggest that
The
instead of
training,
coming up with
the
this
committee
form?
does get training.
I went to the training this year, and all it was how to use the screen, and it turned out that one of the 3 that I trained with had no experience in outcomes whatsoever.
So you're,
And the other 2 did, and it came out in the course of the conversation, and it sounds like it worked out fine, but it was important, with what we're doing, important to know that.
that particular member, because that came up in our after action, so outcomes is not the word in her industry that they use for what we were talking about. So it was, what didn't present itself as an issue to the scoring. She knew what we were talking about once it was translated, you know, into whatever word their industry uses. But she makes grants on a regular basis. And,
Right.
And that
Right.
require, maybe they're not calling them outcomes, but you get what I'm saying. So
Well, she was doing housing grants, if it's the same person.
she is,
So, yeah.
sure.
And she was great. She just wasn't familiar with the performance-based stuff for.
So, once again, why would we have to make a form that's timeless? Because it may not be timeless next year. And let that committee figure that out. Let them figure it out for themselves next year, make suggestions, and be done.
I can visit with Sasha further about it. I remember when we put together that first list, and it was somebody else that put it together, but it was the first time, and there were, I'll have to go back. I'll work on it with Sasha.
Okay, anything else? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, ma'am.